Hey everyone, as usual, welcome to another episode of the Smartdom PhD podcast. And today I have a rather unusual PhD on this episode. And I say unusual because this PhD moved from plant molecular biology into oncology and hematology. And I've seen so many PhDs struggling with plant molecular biology to place themselves in the industry. Earlier, patient journey partner at Roche. Currently, she will be moving into her new space, which is Abbey, as we are shooting this podcast. I am here to welcome today's guest, Dr. Kanika Gupta, who has a very diverse portfolio. Though she has done a PhD, she's also an executive MBA from IIM Calcutta. So we are going to get into all those questions as to what pushed her to do a MBA too. But before that, Kanika, welcome to the Smartdom PhD podcast. And the first question that I directly want to jump onto is you moved from plant molecular biology into oncology and hematology, right? So how did you make that connection? Because many people don't know. How is it connected? Can you please enlighten us over there?
Sure. So
Yeah.
first of all, thanks, Rima, for having me. It's a wonderful, initiative that you are working upon. And coming, quickly to the question, plant molecular biology to oncology, it is like a planned move. When I was working as a PhD scholar, I was very, very, clear that I don't want to pursue, that bench work research full time.
Hmm.
So I was very sure while I was writing my thesis, I was like constantly trying to know that what are the opportunities that lies in the industry. So this happened while I was in my thesis writing phase. I didn't apply for any of the postdoc fellowships that we have in India, like NPDF,
Yeah.
Kothari, and
Yeah.
others, which my peers are doing.
Yeah.
Neither I applied for any postdocs abroad.
Hmm.
So I was looking that what all opportunities are exist, outside this bubble that I'm currently in.
Hmm.
So I made my LinkedIn profile also and tried to connect with people that, hey, what are you doing, what are the opportunities. So I connected people with diverse backgrounds in the industry, and with all my, this is also kind of research that I did, and I came across like five major directions, I must say, in which I can, pursue my career in. So I'll be very honest that during my initial time, I've gone all out. I was applying to everything and anything that is, coming my way. So oncology and hematology, it felt right. I'll, explain in detail that how, Roche opportunity landed in first place.
Hmm.
But yeah, I was applying to, first of all the R&D positions that are in the industry
Yeah.
for so that my transition is easy from
Yeah.
lab to lab.
Right.
And then I was also, applying in the scientific publications kind of industry, wherein there is scientific writing involved
Right.
and such kind of roles.
Hmm.
Thirdly, I was also applying in the hospital administrative kind of role, because
Hmm.
I felt that I have those kind of leadership
Skills.
skills, and those can be transferable.
Yeah.
And fourthly, I was also looking after this patent thing, because I filed my own patent. I wrote my own patent and filed it
Hmm.
in during my PhD. So
Hmm.
I also appeared for the patent agent examination, and I was also going all out and applying on the patent and the law firms, wherein scientific people are in demand.
Hmm. Hmm.
And lastly, I was applying to the commercial roles in the industry,
Hmm.
majorly in the pharma,
Hmm.
and applying all out, talking to people, making these five buckets
Hmm.
wherein my CV can fall upon. I tailored my CV according to these five important areas of uh, industry wherein PhDs can have opportunities.
Hmm.
And then eventually I landed up having two to three offers in different segments. Like I had offers from Thermo Fisher
Hmm.
in protein biology R&D role. I
Hmm.
had offer from Roche,
Hmm.
and I had offer from one more Indian company
Hmm.
who is working on the sequencing kind of role. I don't remember the name of the company,
Yeah.
but that is this story. And finally, I landed up in Roche, which is a commercial role.
Hmm.
It is an integrated role. We call it as a patient journey partner, wherein the commercial integrates with the strategy, marketing, and medical, everything combined together. And this is the role that I entered in the February 2022. I
Hmm.
just submitted my thesis, and my final viva was also pending at that time.
That's a very, very interesting thing. Like you didn't even wait. The transition was so quick because you did so much work prior to that,
Yes.
Kanika. And I see that there are so many segments you went into, like for exploring, and then you kind of narrowed down on 5 things, right? So we're
Yes.
going to come back to your journey at Roche, but before that, I want to ask you the patent that you already had, right? So how did you figure out that patent is important for, industries? Because many PhDs don't know that if you have a patent, that always carries a weight, a commercial weight that you should position rightly in your resumes. Can you share something around that?
So, to be very transparent, I didn't apply for a patent because I want to move into the commercial strategy roles or to the industry. I
Hmm.
was just working on my experiments and doing my work routinely.
Hmm.
And my experiment was going little bit mundane and boring because it is not giving out any results, and it was like already 1.5 year working into that.
Hmm.
So my PhD supervisor was advising me to try new things, and he was like pushing me to make it work.
Hmm.
So somehow I tried different ways, and finally it got succeeded.
Hmm.
And I was happy that my experiment worked. I
Hmm.
didn't knew that it is patentable.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is when my supervisor and I, we were in the greenhouse,
Huh.
and I was like showing him that, see, this is the thing that happened.
Yeah.
And his eyes rolled, and he was like, come on, I mean, this is novel.
Hmm.
This can be patented. I think I know that what how patent works, but I
Hmm.
didn't knew that how to write a patent, how to apply for a patent.
Hmm.
I was very, very, uh, having a very little knowledge,
Right.
very novice in that domain.
Yeah.
So he was the one who was like, and I was also got very excited that, after all, with so much of hard work and so much of negativity and having boredom,
Hmm.
this is something new which has come up.
Hmm.
And it's been like more than like 5 to 10 years in my department that nobody has filed a patent on his own.
Hmm.
And no one in my peer was also writing a patent.
Hmm.
So that is altogether a different story, wherein I wrote like around 23 drafts of
Hmm.
the patent. I mean,
Hmm.
I wrote once, then my PhD supervisor, he edited, and this happened for 20 to 25 times. And
Hmm.
then the final draft was ready, because it has to be written in a very legal, language. It is very
Right.
different from how we write our
Writing
research articles
papers.
and thesis.
Yes.
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 So I was not very sure that this patent gonna help me
Yeah.
in my future commercial roles when I apply in the industry.
Yeah.
So this is the
Right. So
story behind.
yeah, I think this is a very unique one because you don't get to write patents. Most of us don't in our
Yes,
PhDs. And that whole experience elevates you to a different level because, as you
true,
mentioned, it's a very different kind of writing than the scientific writing part, right?
true.
So let's come back to your patient journey partner role, right, Kanika? So suppose if someone right now is moving from plant biology, plant molecular biology, or those associated domains into say patient journey partner, how can one prepare for it, number one? And how does the day of a patient journey partner, uh, person working as a patient journey partner look like?
Okay, so I'll answer this question in two parts, as you have asked. The
Hmm.
first part is the preparation, and second is how would I look like.
Right.
So, coming to the preparation part, I think preparation for applying to such kind of roles, it require a lot of unlearning, I would say.
Hmm.
Because first of all, CV, I think CV is the most important part.
Hmm.
Our academic CVs are written in a very different kind of format.
Hmm.
We write our research articles, we feel proud that we are first author or second author,
Yeah.
and we mention all the poster presentations or the research grants that we have got on our name.
Right.
But a hiring manager has nothing to do with this.
Right.
He doesn't know, I mean, what are these terms all about.
Yeah.
We just push our impact factors, that see, this is the impact factor of publication, we have got our research published, but
Right.
he doesn't know what an impact factor is.
Yeah.
So these people are all journalists
Yeah.
who review our CVs. So
Hmm.
first of all, we have to tailor our CV in a very, very journalist way, that anybody can understand in like 10 seconds that what is the impact that you have delivered. It doesn't matter whether you have published a research paper in an impact factor 2 or an impact factor, let's say 20. It just matters that you have published something in your PhD. So I think tailoring this CV and tailoring it such a way, in a journalist way, is one thing which is the main essentials thing when you apply to such kind of roles, because you have to highlight what all skills you possess, what are skills you can deliver, and to make justice for such kind of commercial roles. So I think preparation requires a lot of unlearning, as I've already said, tailoring your CV. And second, the application part also. How do you apply to these jobs? Most of the like PhDs I talk to, they call me or connect with me regarding this. 99% of the people whom I have spoken to, they are, going ahead and doing the cold applications. Believe me, this will never work, because this has not worked for me, and this has not worked for others also. You have to find those people who can, they can talk about you, they can refer you, they can vouch for you, or maybe you have to build those connections, and you have to get your CV referred by somebody who believes in you. Okay. And your CV should be like just one pager. All the academic CVs, like we have like 3-4 pages listing all our achievements, but it has to be super crisp. And what I did is I made my CV in a RAC format, like results, actions, and context. Super sharp. What are the results achieved? What are the actions we did, and what is the context behind it? Okay. And somebody in the industry believed in me. They referred my CV, and one of my hiring managers, he believed in me that this CV is super crisp. It is just one pager highlighting everything in one place. So I didn't know what a patient journey partner is when I'm applying to that role. I just knew that the company is Roche. It's a pharma giant, and I'm gonna work something in either marketing or strategy. And I wasn't sure, but when my CV got, of course, selected by the hiring manager, he called me up and he explained me about the role. So it is not like I am like sitting and applying that, I have to move into the patient journey partner role. No, I just wanted to go, I just looking after a broad roles that, and patient journey partner just felt right at that time. Yeah. And the second part is that how is the, my day looks like.
Right.
Most of my, day works in, talking and connecting with the people, with the stakeholders which are there. Stakeholders are internal stakeholders, like colleagues from medical, colleagues from strategy, colleagues from access and marketing. And external stakeholders are the medical oncologist who sits in different corporate hospitals and the government institutions. So during my time at the PhD, we have to convince like our people who sits as a reviewers, when we apply to the research articles, and they give their comments back in writing. And then we had time to, analyze those things and reply back in another 2 weeks. But here, it's hard for me to adjust also, because these medical oncologists, they are like, giving you a push back on your face, like a real time. And then you have to take your stand that, see, I didn't knew this, but I'll come back to you. Or maybe this can be done this way also. So this thing is not taught during, PhD time. We are always like trained in such a way that we have to apply and we have to do everything in writing. Things move slow, and you have enough time, to think about it. So
I think this is a lot of thinking on the feet that you're talking about.
Yes.
Being completely aware of what are the products of the companies, what will be the questions that's going to come my way, go as prepared as possible.
Yes. So I'll say that I had this evidence kind of scientific muscle, but I have to rebuild, that on the spot delivering muscle.
Right.
while I was at Roche. So that I learned during my time here.
Okay. I have one quick question, Kanika, which is like the way you explain the patient journey partner role.
Hmm.
It sounds a lot like a medical science license role. So are there overlaps? How are they different? Can you give us some information over there?
It's a very interesting question, Srima. I must appreciate this question. So, see, patient journey partner role is a role wherein I'm responsible for the commercial part of any molecule that I'm responsible for.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have to collaborate with MSLs.
Hmm. Hmm.
I have to collaborate with medical affairs function. I
Hmm.
have to collaborate with marketing people.
Hmm.
But I have one single point of contact
Hmm.
for the accounts that I'm responsible for.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it is a key account manager kind of a role,
Hmm.
but the main KPIs are the delivering of the revenue targets that I'm supposed to deliver.
Okay.
However, MSL role is little bit different.
Yeah.
It is a medical affairs kind of a role in the medical affairs function,
Hmm.
wherein you have to collaborate with the same set of stakeholders,
Hmm.
but you don't have any revenue target associated with it.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
You have to talk about science. You don't have to go into the numbers.
Huh. Okay.
Okay, you
Okay.
just have to talk about science and the evidence based articles. You have to work upon the compassionate use programs. You
Yeah.
have to assist the people who are working as a patient journey partner in giving all the materials and the scientific literature that is in demand by the stakeholders or the medical oncologist.
Hmm.
You have to plan the certain kind of initiatives and meetings like advocacy boards,
Hmm. Hmm.
certain kinds of initiated medical events. So
Hmm.
this is the difference between the medical science liaison and the patient journey partner. And from Roche, I'm moving into Avway
Right.
as a medical science liaison only.
Okay, okay. So my next follow-up question was exactly that. Seems like these are roles where you can crisscross easily, move into and move out of. And
Absolutely.
also the fact that you are a patient journey partner. Now that you explained the role to me, I understand the significance of where doing MBA comes in over here, right?
Yes.
And so we'll come back to the MBA part back, Kanika, but I just wanted to ask, now that I got this understanding of patient journey partner and MSL, I believe MSL is more technically heavy because you are very close to your area of work, which can be hematology,
True.
oncology. But patient journey partner is a little moving away from the technical aspect and more focused on the commercial aspect. It's not completely going away, but it's focusing on the commercial
Yeah,
aspect. Is
they
that
are like
right? Yeah.
overlapping. Hmm.
Yes. Okay. Fine. So, can you give us the reason why are you moving into MSL? Of course, we can have these changes, but just curious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, to be very
And before
transparent.
you start answering, Kanika, I just want you to touch upon the fact that as an MSL, you also might have to travel around a lot. Sometimes
Yes,
it can be regional, sometimes it can be national, and sometimes it
yes,
can be beyond. So
of course.
you can touch
So,
upon that as well.
I
Yeah.
mean, while I was a patient journey partner, I was in a close contact with all the medical oncologists that I cover in the complete Delhi and NCR region. So they are like more than 70 plus top medical oncologists that I have relationships with,
Hmm.
professional relationships with.
Hmm.
So one thing that I have noticed is that I really enjoy intellectual conversations with them,
Hmm. 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 Okay.
and I think that is the sole requirement to be a
Yeah.
successful
MSL.
MSL,
Right.
because
Yeah.
I enjoy when we speak about different trial data or the results of any upcoming uh, paper, and whatever new is coming in this domain.
Yeah.
What is the treatment landscape of different kind of diseases in lymphomas or other therapy areas also.
Hmm.
So I thought that maybe I am meant for this,
Hmm.
because this is and travel. Yeah, you spoke
Yeah.
about travel. Travel is never a problem. I enjoy travel. I
Right.
think travel gives a perspective also. And travel is there in the patient journey partner role also. So
Right.
travel is not new for me,
Hmm.
going to the MSL role. So it is a very easy transition, which I believe.
Hmm.
So I took time. I took like a year's time to understand that what all functions can I go in,
Hmm.
beyond this.
Hmm.
In the pharma, there are multiple functions. There is like government affairs, access, advocacy,
Hmm.
and marketing is also very lucrative.
Hmm.
Many people, they want to switch to marketing.
Hmm.
Pharma marketing is one space wherein there is a lot of buzz,
Yeah.
and medical affairs is one.
Yeah.
or either moving into commercial leadership kind of roles. So there are certain different kinds of paths that I can go into, because I think this role gave me such liberty and such kind of experience that I can move into different kinds of segments
Right.
within pharma.
Yeah.
So but after a conscious decision, after a good research on this part, I thought that this would be the best field for me, and I'm very excited to join Avway and work as an
Yeah.
MSL role.
Yeah. Kanika, I want to come back to the academic part now. I'll come back to this again, but just taking a U-turn to the academic part, I want to understand that had you not done a PhD, okay, and got into these roles versus you did a PhD, do you think it would have made any difference?
This is a very new question. I haven't thought about it, but yeah, I think if I have done, soon after my MSc, if I
Yeah.
have moved into pharma,
Yeah.
I would have surely, done good
Hmm.
with respect to the sales or the marketing roles.
Hmm.
But I'm very, very sure that none of the medical affairs roles I would have grabbed if I have not done my PhD, because MBBS, MD,
Hmm.
or PhD
Hmm.
is the minimum requirement of a MSL.
Hmm. Hmm.
So medical affairs function is a big no-no.
Hmm.
And yeah, commercial roles, strategy roles,
Hmm.
or analyst kind of roles
Hmm.
in the consulting companies who are working on the pharma consulting,
Hmm.
or maybe in the roles which are on the access kind of roles like market access.
Hmm.
So such roles I could have opt. But medical affairs is one thing which is only feasible if I have done my PhD.
Okay, thank you. And one more question, again, in this regard, I see that for MSL roles, there are a lot of M-Pharm and all of that are at times preferred in some companies over PhD. Is that true? I've seen this in my work with PhDs. So you can enlighten us. Is that an M-Pharm more preferred over a PhD? And also the fact that you are a PhD in plant molecular biology and also moving into medical science license is an example for many viewers who might be watching this podcast later that anything is possible. Like when you started, you must have not thought that I'll be getting into MSL roles, right? So first question, M farm, D farm, how do you see that? Because many people have that when move into MSL roles.
So, in my experience, Rima, none of B Farm and M Farm are eligible for MSL roles in the top pharmaceutical companies. The minimum requirement is MBBS or MD in pharmacology, and a few of the companies are very rigid about it. They don't even consider PhD in
Yeah,
molecular
that's what I was
biology.
confused. They don't consider PhD, right?
They
They're
don't
very
consider
rigid
PhD also.
about, yeah, MBBS and M.
MD in
Yeah,
pharmacology.
yeah, right.
But plant molecular biology, I think it is the same as the molecular biology only. It's
Right.
just like that. I'm working on the sources, like plant, but the
Yeah.
gene expression pathways, all these things are similar. So it
Hmm.
is easy for me to understand the molecular genetics part.
Hmm.
And as you know, that precision oncology is the new thing which is coming up, and it is going to be the future.
Hmm.
So it is easy for me to understand also, because I've been working upon the molecular biology in my academia for a very long time.
Hmm.
So M Pharma and B Pharma are I don't think that they'll be like
That kind of depth.
considered in the top pharma companies. No.
Yeah.
PhDs in few companies, they are there in the senior leadership roles also.
Right.
Also, people have switched from MSL leadership roles into the commercial roles also. I know many
Right.
people who have done MSL leadership roles, and they are now working on a commercial roles in a good pharma companies. So they are PhDs. So I
Right.
think PhD is the minimum requirement if the person is coming from academia, and
Right.
MBBS MD is, of course, it is being taken in all the good pharma companies. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Now let's come back to you doing your MBA. Okay, Kanika, what pushed you to do an MBA? I, of course, understand there's commercial strategy and all of that involved.
Yes.
What pushed you to do it, and what aspects do you see have now become better because you did an MBA?
Okay, so see, MBA is not an entry ticket for moving to industry. So you
Right.
know that
Yeah.
I completed my 2 years with Roche, and then I started doing my executive MBA from
Right.
IIM Calcutta.
Yeah.
So I would be very clear. I was very clear that I don't want to do an MBA soon after my PhD. First, I have to join the industry, and I landed up. So I think MBA was a deepening kind of a move, wherein I was a part of the room already.
Hmm.
but I have to understand everybody's language. So
Hmm.
that is one thing that pushed me, that see, I'm not getting this. What is this?
Yeah.
So I have that scientific rigor.
Yeah.
I was learning all the nitty-gritties of the corporate world,
Right.
but I was having difficulty in understanding the business communication.
Hmm.
What is people talking about the operating models, people talking about the workflows.
Hmm.
They are speaking about the terminologies in the P&L,
Hmm.
in the finance.
Hmm.
So I wanted to do a general management course,
Hmm.
so that I have an optics of everything that falls into the management,
Hmm.
and I can understand everybody's language who are present in that room.
Hmm.
So MBA doesn't help me to enter into the room because I was already into the room,
Yeah.
but it helped me understand
Hmm.
what people are talking, what
Hmm.
is their language.
Hmm.
So I think it depends solely upon how do you see yourself, how
Hmm.
do you want to improve, where do you want to go,
Hmm.
and it is only possible if you have supporting people,
Hmm.
around you. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm. And I can definitely say the kind of rigor and hard work you did to combine the doing MBA while working. I'm sure it was never easy. And just wanted to ask you what kept you going. I'm sure like there were weekends that must have
Yeah,
got so hectic because already the patient journey partner role, as I understand, is very demanding,
very demanding,
right?
very demanding.
Where you have to speak to a lot of people, constantly in touch with things. You cannot disconnect. So what is
Yes,
it
it is
like? How
very
do you,
operational heavy. It is very
yeah.
operational heavy kind of role.
Hmm.
But I think I somehow managed. It is. I'll definitely. I'll agree. It is very taxing
Yeah,
because
right,
along with work. But I have to. I think do a very good time management in that part. I
right.
have like prioritize everything, that
Hmm.
this is P1, this is P0, and I have to do this.
Hmm.
There is no excuse. So
Hmm.
I think I excelled at time management at that time, and I have my support system. I have built my life in such a way that I have my support system not only at professionally, but
But
also at personal level. So
right,
I have people, my family supporting me,
right,
and I think I managed it well. Maybe PhD has taught me this time management thing,
right.
because we are working on our experiments during the weekends also.
Yeah,
But yeah, I won't disagree that it was easy, or it was difficult, because
right.
all the weekends are there attending the conferences in the
Yeah,
first half, and the second half I'm attending classes and then
yeah,
giving exams,
yeah.
and then also going to IIM Calcutta two times,
Hmm.
for our classes and all the presentations. So
Hmm.
it was difficult, but
And there are a
somehow,
lot of assignments that you have to finish on time.
yes,
I am
lot of
exactly
late
getting.
nights. Believe me, lot of late nights went
Yes,
into
a
this.
lot of late nights. And because you touched on the fact that you had a support system, right? So being a
Yes,
woman now in 2026, moving into leadership roles, how important is it for a woman to have that support system to
yeah,
excel? Because many women tend to pull themselves down. Why can't I do it? Other women can do it. We compare, right? But
yes.
sometimes we have that support system or ecosystem to help us achieve that. How important is that, Kanika, according to
It's very, very important. I think in these times when women are moving into the leadership roles, without support system, it is not possible.
you? Yeah.
So once when I was, in my MSc time, I watched a small clip of Indra Nui,
Yeah.
was then a PepsiCo CEO. So
Right.
she told that in with respect to women, the biological clock is always in
Opposite
conflict.
to the working clock. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Right.
So without support system, it is not possible. You have to have make systems in
Mm.
your home as well. That
Mm.
how will kids will gonna be managed, how meals gonna be managed, how
Mm.
my wardrobe's gonna be managed. You
Mm.
have to have make systems around everything, and of
Mm.
course, it is not possible without having a good husband, a good supporting partner, good
Mm.
in-laws,
Mm.
families,
Mm.
or maybe neighbors also, they also support you. So my father always says that if you are successful, you are not successful only because you did something good.
Right.
You are successful because everybody pushed you to
Right.
do something better in life.
Yeah.
So I made these support systems in my life, in around my whole, professionally also and personally also. And going forward, I think it becomes very important, such kind of workplaces
Mm.
that support women, when they come after their maternity leaves. So
Mm.
organizations like Roche and others, they
Mm.
support these kind of things. We have people who are very friendly, who are very supportive
Mm.
of women going upwards in their career.
Yes.
So yeah, this is gonna be like non-negotiable in
Yeah.
the coming future and now as well. And most importantly, for the women also, they
Yeah.
must not feel guilty of prioritizing themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes we have this kind of like mental overload that
Right.
I have missed my son's badminton class, or I have missed his annual function. No big deal. I
Yeah.
mean,
Right.
men are missing them from the
So bad.
last like 100
Yeah.
years. They are
Yeah.
not guilty. So
Yeah.
why we feel guilty about it?
Yeah.
So
I think it is somewhere uh, so hardwired
condition.
in us, so
Yes, yes.
hardwired that even if you have done an MBA from IIM Kolkata, even if you have made your business work, it still comes back to you that somewhere that guilt starts
Hmm.
working. And
Hmm.
I think you spoke about it. So I'm so glad we touched upon this. So
Yes.
again, if you're a woman, please go ahead without feeling that guilt. Okay.
Please prioritize yourself. Your number one priority should be yourself, and
Yeah.
then comes the kids and work and family.
Yeah, right. So, Kanika, this is not the direction we wanted to take, but I'm glad we went in this direction. So, coming back to PhDs, okay? Now that, just think about the moment when you just passed out in your PhD, and now that we are talking, who was the Kanika then? What did she believe about her, and what does she believe about her now?
Okay, okay. It's a very interesting question. I think belief in myself was there already.
Hmm.
It was never lacking. It
Hmm.
was never lacking.
Hmm.
I grew up in a very small place, and I am like sometimes realize that how far I have come.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
mean, my parents have really worked hard
Hmm.
for me to
Be here.
to be
Yeah,
here. Yes, yes.
right.
I'm
And
super proud of them. I'm
yeah,
super glad, super proud of them that they have invested in me.
yeah.
At that time when girls education was not a priority
Hmm.
in a small place where I belong.
Hmm.
You won't believe, I mean I'm not a 50-year-old, but you
Hmm.
won't believe I studied in a there was no electricity during the night time, so my mother used to light lamps and
Yeah.
all kind of things. So it was a very hardships, and so this kind of belief was already in me. It was instilled in me in a very young age
Hmm.
that you have to be independent,
Hmm.
you have to do something good, you have to you know be proud of yourself. You don't have
Right.
to make us proud, my parents always said, but
Yeah.
you have to have proud on yourself that what you have made your life.
Hmm.
So belief was always there.
Hmm.
But one thing I have learned, that after my PhD, I was like, that relationships, I was not very good in it. But when after I worked here in Roche, I got to know that networking and building relationships is very, very important.
Hmm.
You have to navigate
Hmm.
and talk to people, collaborate with people
Hmm.
in a non authoritative way.
Hmm.
There is a kind of relationship management that works.
Hmm.
It works when you report to somebody, it
Hmm.
works with your colleagues also.
Hmm.
But while I was doing my PhD, I was like just doing my own thing. I
Yeah.
have like
With the
such kind of
blinders on. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
and just focused on my research, my experiments. So I think after my PhD, after my this stint in Roche, after these 4 long years, 4 years and 3 months, I have realized that the importance of collaboration, teamwork, and relationship building. I
Hmm.
think this is the thing which will take me forward in life. Yeah.
Right. And because you spoke about relationship building, do you think, I personally think so, being PhDs in the Indian ecosystem, we do slightly develop this thought process of I know it all. And we have this ego. I'm a PhD. Okay. I have these many publications. Do you think it sometimes happens? The ego gets a little higher with PhD,
Of
where you
course.
need to put it aside and focus on, as you say, building relationships. How can you add
Yes.
value? What was your experience there?
See, Rima, it does come. It
Yeah.
does come. Because why? Because soon after you finished your MSc, you
Yeah.
have to appear for certain examinations.
Hmm.
And those examinations are so
That's
rigorous.
correct.
You already
Yes.
have went through it. You
Yeah.
know it.
Right.
And after you have those scholarship in hand,
Yeah.
still you have to appear for the interviews. So
Right.
you are among those few
Elite,
creamy
you
layer
can
of
say.
the people who are
Yeah.
highly intellectual, and
Yeah.
you carry that pride on your shoulders that, see, I have cleared it, I have made it,
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
and then when you entered your PhD, then that thing, it slightly declines,
Yeah.
because all of your peers are the ones who have made it.
Exactly.
So when you are selected, you that ego is there, but
Yeah.
when you are working on your PhD on your projects, they are like up in when there is one success, there are 99 failures. So that ego sometimes it drips off. But when you graduate, then also you move into the corporate industry, you have very few people of those achievements on their shoulders. They have not done such kind of thing. One of my colleague, I remember one story that I was attending a conference, and one of my colleague from Roche, he asked me that, Kanika, how do you feel attending this conference? He was like, he was trying to ask me that it is my first time. But I told him that I was on the other side of the table. I was the one who is delivering those presentations, and was on the podium and have delivered such kind of meetings and conferences, have attended not only in India but also in abroad, that is fully funded by the government of India. I think such things also offended him also, because he was not aware that PhDs are exposed to such kind of things. So you have that kind of ego, I would say. I had that, but I have to then narrow it down and understand from their perspective also that maybe they are not exposed to these things, and they assume that PhDs are the ones who are just wearing their lab coats, working in the lab, but that is not the case.
Right. Okay, Kanika, let's shift gears to something like the interview. Okay, I'm sure right now you must have sat on interview tables and you must have seen some of the PhDs. What mistakes do you see them doing repeatedly? Can you point out one or two mistakes you see them doing repeatedly?
I haven't had any experience of taking interviews of PhD candidates. But I have gone through it. I have made those mistake myself.
Okay. Let's hear it then. Yeah, let people learn from it. Yeah.
So I think one of the most important thing is that we are not trained in delivering or answering the behavioral questions. We are not trained for it. Whenever we are in front of the reviewers, JRF to SRF upgradation also, it needed the reviewers meeting. Or we are like in the presentation room with the fellow candidates. They all ask the questions on the science. Nobody asks the behavioral questions, and we are not trained to do so. We only speak about the research. We cite articles, we cite examples that this and this research is done here, that's why I have planned my experiment in this way. I have done this hypothesis in this way, the result should come in this way. But nobody asks you those questions. But when you are in front of the people in the corporate, they ask you that when is the last time that you collaborated with people, or some of your experiments failed, how did you manage to do them? So they ask very behavioral kind of questions. Or what do you think that if there is any disagreement between you and your colleagues, how will you handle it? And I was like blank. Because
and before you go any further, people tend to think that this do not decide the fate of their interviews. It does. Even if you're technically so good, and if you mess up here, you will lose the offer.
Of course you lose. So you have to be very diplomatic also sometimes. And actually you have to describe your own work in a different way. You have to package it. I will say, I will use this word. You have to package it in a very new way.
Yeah, I'm glad you used the word package, because this is something, the exact thing I covered in one of my videos. How are you packaging yourself? Yes.
So those behavioral questions, I think technical part is okay. Transferable skills also, there are like multiple videos wherein people talk about transferable skills, problem solving and critical thinking. Everything is fine. That we can prepare, but behavioral questions are the ones which make or break the job.
Okay, so one final question on that note, Kanika. If someone is doing PhD in 2026, right, and maybe 4 years, 5 years down the lane, they are going to be passing out. How do you see the market shifting so that, just like you, they can be more prepared and not have that take a hit right after finishing PhD that, oh my God, I don't know where I belong. How can they prepare that way? Is there anything that you can share? Also with AI, I know that now for MSL roles also, maybe you're using AI to understand the customer insights just so that you don't miss. So how does all that impact? If you can share some closing insights.
People these days who are, joining PhDs, they are way more smart than we were.
Right.
They are already on LinkedIn. They
Hmm.
know how to use LinkedIn.
Hmm.
They know the power of connections.
Hmm.
I got a lot of requests daily from the fellow PhDs who are young and recently joined, academia or research.
Hmm.
So I think they know better.
Hmm.
And there is not a necessary or mandatory to join industry also after PhD. Many of them gonna be, going into academia and being, going into the teaching, assistant professor, associate professor kind of roles.
Hmm.
Multiple people will go into the postdocs and they'll pursue higher end research.
Hmm.
But the people who are, will stay back in the industry and approach the industry in a way, they have to have, network building in a very early age on, because that will help them understand that what kind of roles they can go into.
Hmm.
Even now I am discovering new kind of roles which I could have gone into soon after my PhD. So
Hmm.
such new things are coming up.
Hmm.
So, there are multiple roles in the healthcare consulting also, wherein they need people who are specialists like PhD.
Hmm.
They have multiple positions. There are a lot of GCC centers that are coming up.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
So they need such kind of people. So
Hmm.
I think awareness about the industry,
Hmm.
how the pharma industry is going, how the hospital, administration industry is going,
Hmm.
and how the medical tourism is also going.
Hmm.
Because these days, India is emerging as a hub for medical tourism.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So I think new PhDs have to understand this trend.
Hmm.
They have to understand the importance of the networks,
Hmm.
leverage those networks,
Hmm.
because people are already there. They
Hmm.
are there to help you. They are
Hmm.
there to watch for you. You
Hmm.
have to just go and ask for it.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Thank you, Kanika. I think throughout the conversation, certain things that definitely stay with me is number one, because you mentioned you come from a place where the privilege was not high. So it doesn't depend on where you come from. You can go anywhere as long as you're focused. Number one. Number two is your behavioral interview questions does decide the faith of your interview. And number three is women who are listening to us, please prioritize yourself. So, Kanika, I keep saying all my guests that come to my podcast that I need you one more time. So definitely I need you one more time for one more
Of
deeper
course.
conversation, Kanika.
Sure, sure.